Good evening, universe. Tonight I'm going to be talking about all of my 2022 reading goals. I tend to be pretty light on the reading goals. I take it very easy with myself. So my first goal is just going to be reading 35 books this year. That comes down to about 3 books a month, which I think is totally reasonable, definitely within my ability to do. But I like having a little bit of a goal just to kind of keep me on track and keep me inspired to keep reading. While I love reading, when I don't have goals like that, it's really easy for me to get distracted with other things. And so this way, it kind of keeps me invested in this hobby that I love so much. My next goal has to do more with the content of what I'm reading. I usually read a lot of young adult fantasy. That is my favorite genre / age range cross section. But this year I want to mix it up a little bit. So my goal is to read 5 non-fantasy books this year. I feel like adult fantasy is a little bit too cheaty, plus some things, cross over in ways, and like breaking it down into what is YA and what is adult fantasy gets into funky waters sometimes. So I'm just going to say 5 completely non-fantasy books, or reads in general. I'm thinking I'm probably going to be putting some mysteries in there, maybe some classics, maybe some slice of life or horror manga, maybe some romance manga, those kinds of things. I tend to be more open to different genres when the medium is manga, so I'm definitely hoping to check some more out of my usual range stuff out and kind of expand my horizons. That leads into my next goal, which is extremely specific. I want to read some Junji Ito, specifically Uzumaki. I am not generally a big horror fan. I do not like horror movies at all. The scariest that I tend to get is Supernatural and the openings to Supernatural. There are definitely some things that I feel like I'm missing out on because of my aversion to horror. So I want to check out some more horror stuff. Now, I'm not going to be reading Stephen King or anything like that, just because I don't have any interest in that. But I do have interest in some of Junji Ito's works. I think that sounds really provocative and interesting, and I would like to know more about what he kind of gets into. So my first read in Junji Ito is definitely going to be Uzumaki. I'm interested in checking out The Spiral. Murphy Napier had a really inspiring review about this, so I'm very excited to check it out, and I'll be reading that as soon as it's available at my local library. And speaking of the library, that kind of gets into my next goal. This one is kind of vague with no specific numbers or anything like that, but I'm definitely planning and hoping to do most of my reading from the library this year, or books that I already own. I am not doing a book buying ban exactly, but I am planning on buying a lot less books this year. I had to move twice last year, and that kind of taught me that I don't need these huge book collections, especially because I ended up getting rid of a lot of the books that I had while I was in the process of moving. And I like doing that. I like donating my books to the library, selling them back, or giving them to friends. But I think for the most part, I want to cut back on some of my buying and definitely buy stuff that I am pretty sure I'm going to want to read again. So like a lot of manga. Manga is very easy to reread, and I love having the art. So most of my book buying is going to be related to that, or buying used books. I definitely want to cut back on buying new books. Also related to that, I want to whittle down my physical TBR. I'm hoping to have less than 10 books left on it by the end of the year. I don't know how many I have on it right now, but I think it's doable. Let's see, I might even have less than 10 right now. No, that's definitely not true. I definitely have more than 10 on it right now. Yeah, so the goal is less than 10 by the end of the year. Included in that physical TBR is another one of my goals, which is to finish the First Era Mistborn trilogy. I read the first one in that series, which used to be called The Final Empire, but now it's just called Mistborn. I read that last year in 2021. So this year I want to read the other two books as I get closer into the big names in fantasy like Brandon Sanderson. And jumping off of that, I want to start reading The Wheel of Time this year. I believe that starts with Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, and it is a huge undertaking. That's one of the reasons why I haven't started picking it up so far. It's all adult fantasy. The books are huge, and I think it's like 12 books in total. So it's definitely going to be a long time reading that, and there are so many other books that I want to read that diving into those really thick ones tends to be a little bit intimidating for me, but I'm interested in it. I want to see what it has to offer and at least give it a shot to see if it's, to my tastes. So my goal is to start reading and hopefully finish the first book before the end of this year. Those are all of my major reading related goals. Like I said, having goals really helps keep me on track with this hobby. It adds to my enjoyment rather than taking away from it. So that's why I like to keep goals in mind when I'm reading. Makes me feel accomplished, when I come to the end of the year. So let me know down below if you guys have any reading goals of your own, if you accomplished any reading goals from last year. I didn't really have that many reading goals last year. I was still kind of reeling from the onset of the pandemic, then having to move twice. There was a lot of stress there, other than I wanted to read, I think, 30 books last year, and I did accomplish that. So I'm pretty happy with that. But I didn't really set out that many specific goals for like the content of what I was reading or anything like that. So I'm excited to have these to kind of reflect on throughout the year and check out at the end of the year and see if I met them. I would love to hear about any goals that you have. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out with me. Have a great night, universe.